All right, it is now 5 p.m., Wednesday, September the 25th, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. The BEDC Board reserves the right to reconvene, recess, or realign the regular session or call executive session or order of business at any time prior to the adjournment. So we will start. Do we have any public comments?
No, sir, we do not.
All right, very good. We'll move right along then. We will go to 3.A, provide an update to the Bastrop Economic Development Corporation Board regarding changes to the Navis Consulting contract. Sylvia.
Thank you, Chair. So many of you are aware or not aware that Kat Caffrey with Navis Consulting has accepted a job as a city manager in a northwest town in Washington State. So as a result of that, she is bringing a person under her group with Windsor Consulting who will be able to finish the contract. The executive board met with the Windsor group at our last meeting and feel confident that he can take the contract to the finish line.
As a matter of fact, he wants to come into the next meeting in person.
At the next executive, yes.
Yeah, so that we can ask any additional questions or get any kind of updates on things. Okay, any questions from any directors? Okay, very good. Moving on to 3B, provide an update to the BEDC board on the sports complex feasibility study and a potential visit by Hunden Partners on October 8, 2024.
So Hunden Partners is the firm that was selected to complete the feasibility study. They have selected October the 8th as their date. They said they will be on site anywhere between 3 and 4 hours. It's not necessary for the board to meet with them on site, but if any members of the board would like to do that, we can make sure that we post for a quorum.
Okay, very good.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
For the study, I was trying to remember when this all first started, did they incorporate for the indoor activities, basketball?
We don't know what any of the sports are going to be yet. That's what the feasibility study is going to take into account.
So are they going to go off of that original rendering that we got?
No.
No. So it may not even look like that.
May not even look like that.
Okay. So can we give input as to what we'd like for them to include in their study, feasibility-wise? Because I don't think there's ever been a mention of basketball courts for basketball tournaments, which are really big. And then there was one other. Oh, and then in the original rendering, there was a little recreation space there. So I was asked by the community, by members of the community, if part of the study could be a rec center, and the city partnering or BEDC partnering with them for us to have access and space for a rec center.
So this feasibility study is first taking into account our area and is it even feasible for Bastrop to have a sports complex?
Okay.
That's like step one. And then if that's a check mark, yes, because everybody else is happening, because there are some others in development in our area. If that's a check mark, yes, then we'll delve into, okay, what does that look like? Okay. What are those, what we call gaps, right? Where are those gaps in service? Is it some weird archaic sport way over here, or is it, XYZ? Once we get to that point, then we begin to put sort of meat on the bones and what does that look like. But I think we're still at the mercy of what's going to drive the market because we are looking, yeah.
And I just wanted to make sure that basketball was included in that assessment because I don't think that it was previously. We talk a lot about soccer and baseball and pickleball. But those basketball tournaments are pretty popular too in Austin, all over. And then again, someone asked about the recreation piece. If that can somehow be incorporated into a space. I know that we're looking at private, right? But partnering with them for use of a space that would allow for.
Yeah, at some point down the line, if we get to a point where, okay, this is what it would look like, these are the things, there may be some opportunity for partnerships with the BEDC, but at the point that the private entity is driving that, we've got to figure
Right.
out, okay, what would the city's rates be if we did? Because we're going to have to, right? we're gonna
Charge
be a customer.
anyway. The thought is to
Yeah.
be able to do it
Yeah.
for free, but
Yeah.
the reality
Yeah.
is there would be a cost. Okay, thank you.
I would just to comment on that, I would just like to remind anyone listening here that when we first started talking about this, we made a real quick decision that nobody on either side, whether it's the EDC or the city, and collectively, since we put the whole group together, right, or we had three on one side and three on the other, we weren't the ones to make the decision of what sports are going to come. None of us are in that business. That's why we really decided we need a feasibility study to make sure that what we think is great is actually going to be great. And since we're not going to be operators or developers, a lot of it depends on who comes in to set the thing up. Those are all good things to ask them and talk to them about that and see what does that mean from a revenue point and how big is it and that kind of stuff. We can definitely have input into that. But there's never been a discussion about having a rec center portion of it for this particular complex.
Well, I mean, the original drawing did have a little rec center on there, so that's where that came from. But that brought up another question. So Hunden is going to do, to your point, interim. I didn't know what to call you in this moment. So Hunden is going to do a feasibility study to see if that land is feasible to even build it, right? So then are we going
Not
to...
so much the land, because
Or the area.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's more the environmental scan, because there is one going to go up in Kyle. There's, talk about the Coda expanding into that arena. So it's more of an environmental scan. If Bastrop did this, would it be a feasible return on investment? And if it is, and there is a space for it, what could those sports potentially be?
So my second question is, if that box is checked, and then we start looking at what types of sports would be there, is that, do we then have to hire another firm to do the feasibility for that piece, or that would just all be done by?
So no, I think we'll continue the dialogue. What we talked about in the subcommittee was that at that point, right, whatever sport is identified, there is a lot of, what do we call them, specialty, gosh, I'm
Like
drawing a blank.
AAU.
Somebody tell me, competitive,
Yeah.
super competitive sports. And there's a lot of those type of parents in here. We would do some small focus group studies on, what is that? How much do you pay? Where do you go? What is the expectation? And then we would kind of begin to hone in that way.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I just want to clarify, because I know what you mean when you said that taking a look environmentally, but I don't want that to be confused with the toad and everything else.
Okay, no.
Because that's kind of a key
Yes,
word.
yes.
So it's really more of a, does a sports complex make sense in Bastrop, Texas?
A business
compared
scan.
to, from an economic standpoint. And then the stuff that so basketball's not excluded, and for all we know, they'll come back with, there's a huge hole for basketball, and that's the key sport.
And volleyball
may,
or whatever, yeah.
But there's a lot of niche sports, but the really and truly, and the reason we talked about them not being able to be in the RFQ, which would be the next part of it, is because we didn't want them to come up with a reason for the answer to be what their specialty was. Really, nobody had, no conflict of interest, given the landscape of the other facilities that are up and running, facilities that are expanding, and facilities that are on the books that are known publicly, because there's some that aren't known there's other people thinking about it too. Can it make money? Because the very first, if it can't make money from a private standpoint, then we kind of are back to square one and need to regroup anyway. And we wanted to do that with really good information and not do that after we'd spent a whole bunch of money and now have a facility that's not being utilized.
I think
Sorry,
we
I
talked.
just-
No,
the
no, I think,
environmental,
I think, yes, it's on, well, in business school, right, it's an environmental scan. What's everybody in the environment doing? From a, we talked about, okay, is it like some obscure sport? Is it cricket that's going to come up? Is it some, and then we've got to deal with what does that look like? So it could very well be basketball. It could very well be volleyball. It could very well be, any number of sport, yeah.
Yeah, because one of the other big things that we added to the feasibility report was year-round utilization. So that may be, there may be things inside and outside in order to get that year-round, the more it's utilized, the more it's going to.
Right, and that's why I brought it up, because there's well, again, I was going off of the old rendering,
Yeah.
but the indoor piece, there are a lot of sports that are indoors, and I don't think we really talked about that previously.
And my personal opinion, and this is my personal opinion, and 50 cents might still not buy you a cup of coffee, but knowing where I come from, where there is a partnership in the P3 world, where there is a little bit of a space for community use. The city pays for it, we pay the electricity, we pay the, whatever. It's not a quote-unquote free ride. But I also know that if the school's interested, the school will have to negotiate with said developer and work through it. So I think there's a space for it all to happen. It's how we all make it happen when the first driver is economics.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, very good. We will now move on to section 4, regular business and presentations. Approval of the meeting minutes from regular BEDC board meeting of August 26, 2024. Looking for a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Very good. We will now go to 4B, receive the financial report for period ending August 2024.
Can you hear me now? There we go. Okay, the first slide, of course, is just our year-to-date actual. We're going to get to sales tax in a minute, but we are actually trending positive for total revenues, and we are not spending all of the money. So we are going to have a pretty significant total net income, I think, for the end of the fiscal year. You can see here that our sales tax received for the month of August was $121,692. It is less than projected. The general fund for the city is actually less too. This is just the trend. I can tell you that we collected $135,312 in September. We're still going to be under budget for the year by $253,000. Fortunately, the interest income will cover that plus more. There were interest income.
Revenue down from sales tax 253.
253.
And revenue from interest income up.
Currently $602,000.
Well, it's not up 602, it's at a total of 602 according to
Oh,
your
sorry,
year-to-date actual.
$352,000. Yep, I apologize. Correct, but it still covers the difference. And we have another month of interest to record for September. Also, you can see that expenses there were no significant changes in expenses for the month of August. This is also showing you the difference from fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 23. Of course, these aren't apples to apples because we had significantly more collections in 23 due to the change in allocation. And here is that equity statement. I went through each one of these and pulled contracts for these. The designated operating and contributed capital, those were done prior to 2019. I am going to make an assumption. I could not see further back in code than that. And I went through files and didn't see any detail, but my assumption is that some of those are startup costs. The Fiesta, I pulled that contract. That $233,000 was supposed to be paid in two phases of $116,934. We have not paid any of that. The AEI technology, they only had one more payment left of $9,333. I'm going to skip MoCA for a second. TA Bastrop, was to be reimbursed $300,000 once they met their obligations. And then I pulled Mocha Ventures, and I pulled the entry for this, and I'm not really sure why it was recorded the way that it was. That's not it. But I can see in the agreement where it says that we will pay back $900,000 less the closing costs of $63,353 less $3,500 of attorney fees. The entry that was made to restrict $333,000 was made on February 18th, 2022. I did not do this. I don't know the method behind this madness. There was a gain on the sale of the land of $841,000 that was recorded, and it rolled into fund balance because it was not spent on anything else. So that is all of the detail that I have for MoCA.
So it's my
It's-
belief, so the MoCA contract says 900, less any closing costs, et cetera, so that is 835,000, et cetera, less the 500,000 contribution for the road, and I believe that's the contributed capital line item. So we don't, the MoCA Ventures was less closing and attorney's costs.
Okay, and obviously, these numbers can change based on several different factors and whatnot, right? So this is just of what you have on the books as it shows right now.
Correct.
It's not that, okay. Yeah, because I'm glad you brought up the 500,000 for the road, because I didn't hear that in the presentation, but that is part of it as well. But we've got other things to, we'll talk about that later, okay? Just for, I'm not a financial guy, sorry, so I'm just curious as why you say the budgeted net income loss of a little over $2 million. How do you budget a loss? Is the loss you're saying that's what we're going to be spending on like capital improvement plans, or we have it already obligated in some other things? I'm just not sure I understand the verbiage you're using here of a budgeted net income loss.
Well, that was according to our budget that we brought to, the amended budget that we brought to you several months ago. I think that was the amount, and that was if we had spent everything that was on the budget. So we are obviously not going to spend that.
That is assuming that's assuming that all of these projects were completed, and we would have to pay out the money to MoCA, the money to Fiesta, the money to AEI, the money to TA Bastrop.
So if we go back to page 19, I think it'll be easier.
Page 19 in the agenda?
Yeah, and so that second column on the amended budget all the way down, that's the number that she carried over.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that, and so it's negative because you're spending 5 and you only brought in 2.
And that's making some assumptions. That's making some assumption that those projects would be paid out. Obviously, we're going to have some conversation in executive session, and those numbers are going to change yet again.
And Chair Spencer, I would like to add one thing. I have been in contact with Technical Adhesives. There was some thought that they might be ready by the end of September, but they're having a little trouble getting their equipment loaded, so I don't anticipate that coming in before fiscal year 25.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the capital outlay, I reduced the Accutronic site ready from the 1.23 million to the 1 million according to the contract. And that was the only change on this slide. And the city project drawdown. Okay, so the intersection improvements was, I pulled the resolution for this. I think that what had happened here is that the plan was to do this in a phase of a study and then provide the construction costs or actual improvement costs. Well, the study was $22,500 performed by Kimley Horn. That was actually done. The rest of it, what the city was that's wrong. That says the city will reimburse the EDC, or no, that is correct. the EDC was going to give the city $185,000 for the improvements. Those did not happen. Whenever I was looking at the detail, I pulled the traffic. There was some traffic improvements or traffic study or something that was done that I was under the impression was intersection improvements. It was not. So that money has been transferred back to the EDC.
So the difference between 207,500 and 22,500.
Correct, $185,000.
Thank you. I just kept, I knew there was no way we spent $271,000 on a study. That just
The study
did
was
not
rather
happen.
cheap. I've not seen a study that
Yeah.
cheap in a long time.
Yeah, but I knew, cheap or not, I knew it
Yeah,
wasn't $271,000 or $207,000. So this, you said you're going to correct it, but it's not corrected on this page
Not in
that we're
August.
looking at.
It was corrected in September.
Okay.
So, because this is something that I just dug into last week.
So
Or maybe
then the
week
next
before
time we're
last.
here, that will be added back into?
Yes.
Okay, the balance.
Well, and so the question remains, because this study, I think you were saying, was done in '22, but that was fiscal year '23.
It was done in fiscal year '23.
But part of calendar year '22 is in fiscal year '23.
Correct.
So I think it was done towards the end of '22, and that was, the whole thing was because we needed to improve the intersections.
There was some intersections such as Jackson, and there was some intersections that were going to be part of the industrial park improvements also. It was a 95 Jackson.
The intersection improvements that for this study were more of the backing up. It was Hassler, it was Burleson, it was the stuff that was backing up into the retail, which was why BEDC was interested in it. Because it was, you couldn't get out of Walmart, you couldn't get out of Burleson West, knowing that Burleson East was coming. And the discussion was, we don't have to do an intersection study of the entire city. We already all know where we're sitting. And so that was part of why it was such a cheap study, because it was only on real specific things. And it was like, let's put the money towards a right turn lane and, you know, a chicken lane, continuous left, whatever. Look at the intersections to try to get more traffic through the intersections. But in my memory, and I can pull back my notes, the reason the EDC was tapped for funding was because it was specific to retail.
So now that council has passed a transportation impact fee, those impact fees can go to those improvements.
So then another 185,000 will just come back to
Yes.
the EDC general fund?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Any questions?
Okay, any further questions on the finance? All right, thank you. All right, 4C, consider an act on giving E&M Properties official notice of the intent not to renew the lease at the current BEDC office effective October 1, 2024.
As board, as you know, Angela and our new staff member, that's the memo on your, at the dais, are expected to move into City Hall. We've got, our utilities folks have moved out at the end of last week, so we've got some improvements to make into the area. But that allows us to give official notice with our intent to vacate at the end of the lease term, which is the end of December.
Great, okay.
I think you need a motion.
Yes, I
And
need a
I
motion.
would make a motion that we give E&M Properties official notice that we are not going to renew. And I would encourage us to do that as soon as possible and not with what's required by the lease,
Yes.
so that they have the most amount of time to get a new person in there.
We will also be, we've had some questions about the furniture. We'll be going through the surplus process with the furniture.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Thank you, the motion carries. Very good, thank you very much for the update. All right, we're going to be, number 5, the Bastrop EDC Board of Directors will meet in a closed executive session pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, to discuss the following. Number 1, Section 551.087, Economic Development Negotiations regarding Project Electric Lion. Number 2, Section 551.071, consultation with attorney regarding the potential termination of the performance agreement with Project Fiesta, AKA Colzin LLC. Number 3, Section 551.071, consultation with attorney regarding the performance agreement with Mocha Ventures Nebraska LLC. Number 4, Section 551.071, consultation with attorney, Section 551.087, economic development negotiations, and Section 551.072, deliberation regarding real property regarding LS Electric, a property owner in the Bastrop Business and Industrial Park. And then number 5, Section 551.087, economic development negotiations to deliberate offer of financial incentive to BRP East LP. After which the Board of Directors will reconvene into the open session to discuss, consider, and take any action necessary related to the executive sessions noted herein. It is 5:26. 6:32, and the Bastrop EDC Board of Directors is reconvening into open session to discuss, consider, and/or take any action necessary related to the executive session noted herein. And there is no action to be taken at this point in time.
Motion to adjourn?
All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.